Welcome to the comeback. My name is Renee Sorensen. Here we are for the first time. We're just testing out if anybody who is on can maybe write a comment and just let them know if we got to see that intro and if you guys are all is working well and good. I see that there's a couple of you on, so if you guys could write a comment and just say like hello or yes, all is well, that would be super awesome. Just want to make sure the stream is pulling up. Looks like you can't pull it up. Okay. All right. Sweet. Thanks. Okay, you guys. All right. So welcome to the comeback. My name is Renee Sorensen. I'm super excited to launch tonight. I guess you would call this the premiere of new and beautiful things going on. Thanks for the comments in the intro, in the comment section. I really appreciate that. I started this YouTube channel for a couple different reasons. I just kind of wanted to give a recap of that. Every day I feel like I run into somebody who has a really cool story, and is that normal for that to pull up on the screen like that? Okay, cool. So my husband's here helping me. God bless him. He's awesome. So anyway, I feel like I have been inspired by so many people in my life with really cool things that they have come back from in hard times, and some that are self-inflicted, some that are unexpected happenings. And I felt it was really important to be able to share that with people that I love and know and around the world, because I gain inspiration from all of these really cool stories. This story tonight is extra special. Mandy touched me in a really impactful way. I'm going to go into that in just a little bit, but I'm super stoked for everybody to be here. I do want to start real quick with a disclosure. I am not a therapist. I have been to a lot of therapy in my life, but I am absolutely not a therapist. So if I have advice that might not be the most perfect advice, I'm just going to let you know right now. My goal here isn't to give advice anyway. Two, the content of tonight's story is going to be slightly graphic, not in detail, but in experiences that my guest has experienced. So I want to just give a full disclosure that this is probably not for children audience. So that being said, I also want to just go right into Mandy's story. About 10 years ago, I was in a transition in my life. I was in the middle of a short marriage that I had, which I kind of touched on in my own story. And I was dealing with the kids whose parents I was trying to navigate, who actually was struggling with addiction. And so I was taking care of these kids that had a mom coming in and out of their lives. And it was a really hard thing as a stepmom to navigate. And at the same time, I ran into Mandy parallel to this time in my life. She actually was walking on the street with a friend, and she did not look well. That's putting it a little lightly, and I mean that with all the kindness and respect in the world to Mandy, and she'll get to her story in a minute. But I actually remember pulling over the car and trying to talk to her, and she seemed a little confused and wasn't quite sure who I was, and I had not been able to get Mandy out of my head for probably every day since then. We happened to be friends on social media before that, so I was able to follow some really cool things that she did in her 20s, and I can't wait to have her share that with you. But anyway, I came full circle, and Mandy's story is pretty amazing, but she had started to post all these really cool pictures, and all of a sudden I'm seeing this completely different person than the person I ran into on the side of the road. And I reached out to her about a year ago, and I'm like, Mandy, you've got to tell your story. I don't know how you got to where you are, but you got to tell your story. And she wrote me back, and she's like, I don't know where I would tell my story. And I'm like, I don't know either. And that's kind of been in my back pocket ever since, as well as a lot of other cool, inspiring stories. But I would say that Mandy was the big push for me in order to get on this podcast and tell these stories of overcoming and pivots in people's lives. And I want to give everybody hope. I want to give everybody just hope, and know that we can come back from hard things. We can do hard things, and there's no reason to give up, and there's no reason to stay in that despair. And so this is Mandy's story of her hope, and I'd like to welcome her. This is my friend Mandy Lynn Carter. Welcome, Mandy. How's it going?
Thanks. Yeah, I'm super stoked to be on tonight. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to roll into a little bit. I think it's important, as I've done therapy throughout the years, to kind of touch on people's childhood. So that's how I'm going to try to introduce you here. It kind of gives a baseline for maybe some belief systems that you have, maybe just give an idea so people know a little bit of background and they can kind of connect with you. So if you want to roll into, Mandy, maybe your childhood before we get into the meat of your story, I'd love to hear just a little bit about your experiences in your, from youth to adolescence. So
yeah, most definitely. So in my opinion, I think that the way you act as an adult stems from your childhood. And me, when I grew up in Wyoming, actually, until I was about 7 years old with my mom and my dad. They were married when I was young. At about 7, my family decided to move to Utah, and my mother and my father, they were still together. And I have a brother and an older brother and a little brother as well. So thinking in my mind at that age, I thought that my childhood was normal, because what else would you know? But in fact, that it was pretty dark, and my mother and my father fought a lot. They didn't get along that well. I can remember my parents. We weren't really together as a family. I remember spending time with my mom separate and my dad separate. So there's that. And then we moved to Utah, and my parents decided that they were going to get a divorce. And so I was around 7 at this time. I specifically remember living in a house, and when my mom filed for divorce from my dad, she bought a house like down the street. So it wasn't like we went far, but she took everything from my dad. And when he got home from work, I remember that he pretty much had nothing in the house. So including us kids or a family anymore. And I can remember my mom telling me that we could play outside, but we just couldn't go past a certain point on the street. So I just remember one day, this was my first memory of being like defiant. I went over to my dad's house and sat outside in the front until he got home, because I felt as a kid like my dad's sad. Like that was my first feeling of, remembering that feeling. So moving on, I just remember bits and pieces of my childhood, just being very like thrown back and forth to my mom and my dad because of the divorce. Feeling that I had to pick and choose, sides. That's how I felt. And I didn't really like.
They were actually on the same street.
They were.
Like you could see your dad's house from your mom's house.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Wow. Yeah,
So
that's a lot.
That was at first. The first I remember. So later on, my dad did move. He moved into a condo, and I just remember this condo. It was like every time we went there, it was like the best time of my childhood. Spending time with my dad. My dad was always attentive to us. He was always he was just a really good dad. On the other hand, when we went back to my mother's, it was I just remember being alone a lot. She did work. So um, when we went to school and came home, I just remember being alone all the time. And so me and my brothers, I think that I was around the age, I was less than 10. So my older brother is about a year older than me. So we were still really young and we were pretty much taking care of ourselves, fending for ourselves. Uh, and that was kind of scary at some points, like at night. Anyways, so there was a time that my mom started dating, and I kind of took that as I don't know, she was done with my dad, and I took that kind of hard. I as a kid, you always think, well, they're going to get back together and
Huh.
everything's going to be fine, but it's
Mm.
not like that. And so this man that she started dating, he was pretty abusive,
Mm.
very abusive actually. And that didn't show at first when they were dating, but my mom decided to get married to this man. And I can remember.
At this time, are you still spending equal amount of time at each home?
So at this point, me and my brothers are living with my dad.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, I'm going to backtrack. So during this time, when she had met this man, she had tried to commit suicide.
Mm.
Um,
How do you know that?
I'm not exactly why she tried to do it, because I've never really talked to her
How do you
about
know
it.
that that happened? Is it something she told you or something you witnessed?
So what happened was me and my brothers came home from school. We were very
Okay.
young, and my grandma, like my mom's mom and my mom's sister, they were at the house where we were living. And
Okay.
I didn't understand why they were there because they live in a different state.
Mm.
So they collected all our like some of our things, and we went to Idaho. That's where they were. And I didn't understand what was going on. And so we ended up at my aunt's house, and a day went by, and then like another day went by. We didn't know what was going on, and it just, something felt not right. We couldn't talk to my dad. I didn't understand. So it had been several months, I think a couple months, uh, of this lifestyle at my aunt's house and with my two brothers. And finally, I can remember my dad, well, a police officer came to my aunt's door, and my dad was there with the police because technically when you get divorced, you have half and half. And
Mm-hmm.
so when they weren't telling my dad where his kids were,
Mm.
my dad got a
Mm-hmm.
hold of the police and located where we were and came to pick us up. And I can
Okay.
just remember feeling like relief from that, because
Mm.
as a child, you want to know where your parents are and what's going on.
This is
And
before the
so,
time of cell phones, right? It's
yeah,
not like you could have picked up the phone. Yeah. Okay, so this is before your mom got married. So then did you go with
right.
your dad right after
But
this?
she was dating this man.
Okay.
I think that that she had realized, like, she had seen bits and pieces of like who he was, but
Mm-hmm.
um in my opinion, I think that she still married him because uh when you're in a relationship like that, you don't really see what the big picture.
Mm-hmm.
That's my, now that I can look back on it, that's my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But I could be wrong. Anyways, moving on. So after being reunited with my dad, the way I look at that today, I think that was a really traumatic experience, especially for a child. And I think that
Mhm.
that is some of the trauma that I had to deal with. Not only did my mom try to commit suicide, but being ripped away from my family
Mhm.
and not having answers and just kind of,
Mhm.
um, you know,
Yeah,
everything's quiet. Yeah.
I can relate to that. Yeah,
Yeah.
different circumstances, but very much just the uncertainty of what the heck is next and what's going on, and just a lot of confusion. Sounds like.
Yeah.
So what?
And sorry.
Oh, please.
And with my family's dynamic, mostly with my mom, I feel is that we were taught really, if there's a problem, we don't talk about it. Everything is like bottled up, and the outside is all shiny and clean and, nice looking. But what's really going on inside is an ugly mess.
So
So,
life isn't like an Instagram story. Dang it.
right. No, it's
Yeah.
not at all.
Okay. Yeah.
And the person that I've grown into today, I feel like, um, this was another red flag being a kid, because I like to talk about everything and I like to be open about
Mm-hmm.
myself. And uh, I think holding things in like that damaged me more than I think anyone could realize.
Absolutely. It's very
So
isolating. So yeah. And then yeah, that rolls into a lot of outer behaviors to reach at straws for connection and all sorts of things for sure. Let's touch on a little bit of your. I know you moved at one point in your adolescence, and I know that kind of rolls into, the career path that you chose. So give me a little recap of maybe your teenage years, and I know you had a move that was pretty big, and then kind of what led you into the career of modeling.
sure. So during the time that after my mother got married to this man, we were court ordered to live with my dad. And it was that time in my life, I feel like it was the best time of my childhood going into my teenage years. Um, after so my father was working as well, so there was a lot of time that I kind of felt like I had to be the mom to my two brothers, because
Mm,
there was no mother figure. So like after school, I would make them dinner, or,
wow.
yada yada. And um, so taking on that responsibility, I kind of took it a little too serious, and I I got really sick. I was overdoing it. Um, and I was hospitalized for just being like malnourished and not taking care of myself.
Mm.
And uh, CP, what is that place where they take kids away? CPS,
Yeah. DCFS.
DCFS. That's it.
Yes. Yeah. Department of
DC,
Child Services. Uh huh.
yeah. So DCFS was kind of keeping an like looking at me, and
Mm-hmm.
I
Because of
I
your
remember them.
hospitalization, you were on the radar because you were
Yeah,
hospitalized, which is pretty
I remember
common,
them
yeah.
coming to my house one day and taking pictures of me. Like
This
with
was as a teenager?
No, this was like, I think I was like maybe 13. Yeah.
Okay, wow, yeah.
So 13 or 14. And then after I was hospitalized, I remember, I don't know if my mom got custody of me or
Mhm.
if I was just sent to live
Handed
with,
over.
I can't remember. But
Okay, yeah.
anyways, so I was sent to live with my mom, and she was in a messy divorce with this man. This was a few years down the road, of course.
Mhm.
Um, and I remember she was getting divorced, and she had a house down in Hurricane. And this is where like
Southern
my
Utah?
my
Mhm.
junior high and high school years started. Uh, I spent my ninth grade year sick, my whole ninth grade year. And then
Mm.
10th grade, that's when I started going back to school.
Which is where
And
our
that's,
paths
yeah.
crossed for just a
So
split, a little
me and
bit. Which,
Renee, yeah, we went to
yeah.
school together.
Well, I happen to be new to the area, and so did you. And
Yeah.
so we reminisced the other day about how, dang it, like if our adult selves could have had the conversations with one another at that time, how different things could have been.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny what
Yeah.
you think.
Your
Like,
perception of somebody. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Because I know we were both really lonely and going through a lot, but
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I was like, oh, she's got it together. And you said the same thing about me.
Yeah.
She's like, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, we did not have it together.
No.
Yeah, so funny. Okay, so do you feel like there's any other important things as far as your childhood you want to touch in? Or are you ready to roll onto right from there?
I mean,
So this,
mostly with my childhood, it was just dealing with keeping things quiet, and the abuse that I saw my mom go through, that was really traumatic. The man she married was just evil, and I'm just glad that my mom got out of there alive and okay.
mm,
Maybe not fully mentally, but
yeah.
you know.
So when you moved from northern Utah to southern Utah, you came by yourself. Your brothers were still with your dad at the time. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, and they both came about a year later.
Okay, I remember
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I
Yep.
remember that. Okay, so here's the thing with Mandy too. When you see her on the outside, we showed you the intro video. If there were a look for a runway model, it is Mandy. She's got
Wow.
legs for days. She has like the stance, and it's not like a snooty stance. It's like she's gliding on ice skates as she walks. It's awesome and disgusting all at the same time. No, I don't know. And
Uh,
so there's like this intimidation. But I mean, for a teenage girl who's insecure, I could see how people would not be like, "Come on into my community, beautiful woman." Like,
yeah.
and also you just stood out. I mean, you were probably taller than the majority of the boys that were around. At least your
Yeah.
legs were longer for sure.
Yeah.
But so those were the days of where we met. So that's kind of fun. And
Yes.
then probably right when we became friends on social media at some point. So I got to follow like some of your spreads for sure. And that's where
That's
kind of
cool.
like I was like, Mandy's, I remember running into the mall, and I think you had already started modeling. Do you
Yes.
remember running into me
I
into the
think I
mall?
remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, so good to see you. And you were like, kind of like, okay, cool, that's weird. But I was like, yeah, I'm a little creepy. I mean, Facebook was a new thing, and I was like impressed by you. So, anyways,
Oh,
okay, I'd
thank
love
you.
for you to roll into. I know we could talk for hours. I don't want to
Yeah,
rush you, but I'd love to roll into then what led into your modeling career.
sure. So in high school, uh, like Renee said, I might have looked like I kind of had it together, but like on the inside, I was very I was very shy, timid from the things that I went through. I didn't feel it. I didn't feel welcome where I was at with anybody really.
You definitely had
And
very very high walls.
yes,
That
I
would be my
did.
perception of you. Is
Exactly.
like
That's
as an
perfect.
adult looking back, it's like a trust thing for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I definitely felt like an implant. I
Mhm.
felt like I was treated like one. Um,
Mhm.
I didn't really have friends, but that it goes both ways. I probably didn't let anybody in. So, um, going off that, during my high school years, whenever I did go to the mall or um, in a public place, randomly I would get approached by people from New York or agencies that would just give me their card and say, "Hey, you should come to New York and model."
Mhm.
Well, by the time I graduated, I had a stack of cards like this big from agencies,
Oh, that's so
and
cool. I
yeah,
didn't know that.
And I was
Yeah.
just like, yeah, it was pretty cool. Um,
Uh-huh.
and thank goodness my mom, she was like, well, you can't really do that until you graduate high school, which I appreciate. And so I'm glad that she did that. But during my high school years, like because I had missed my ninth grade year, I was given the option to finish my ninth grade year my senior year. So I technically went to
Mm.
school from 7 in the morning until 7 at night every day of my high school year, and plus I had a job at Dairy Queen. That
Yeah.
was my first. Do you remember
Yeah.
that?
Oh yeah. That
Yeah,
was my first job. Those were the days. I
yeah.
remember that. Yeah. Those were good times.
So
I had forgotten about that, Mandy.
yeah,
I had forgotten about that. Yeah, I ended up staying there for a heck of a lot longer than you did, that's for
yeah.
sure. Anyway, okay, yeah,
I think you were one of the managers, weren't you?
I was. Yeah, I
So
was. That's good times. That's so funny.
it is.
Yeah. Um, so go ahead.
So
So you had this
anyway,
stack of cards. So what did you do with it?
okay. So when I graduated high school, I made the decision to the day after I graduated, I moved to Salt Lake first.
Hmm.
I wanted
With your
to,
dad or with
no,
friends? Where,
I just went. I
peace
just got a
out as
place.
quick as
Like it
possible.
was,
You're like, get me out of this small town.
but
Yeah.
yeah. And so the reason I did this was because I not only didn't feel welcome, in the town that I was in, I didn't feel like I could fully be me with my family, like living with my
Mm-hmm.
mom. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I needed to get out and spread my wings. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't technically move out to go pursue modeling, but it was like in the back of my mind. I wanted to go to
Mm-hmm.
school initially and um, become something that way first. I got to Salt Lake, and again, I just kept getting approached, and
Mm-hmm.
I had a feeling. Um, I said to I could either do this right now and give this life a chance. I mean, what could be the worst that could happen is like I just moved back to Utah.
Yeah.
So I went to Salt Lake and I got a job at JCPenney. I got a job at Starbucks at the airport, and I just started to save money for the first like 6 months after graduating. And I literally had $500 or $600 in my pocket, and I got on Craigslist and I found a place in Brooklyn, and I paid my first month's rent, and I bought a
Dang.
ticket and I went.
Can't do that nowadays. There is no way
No.
there's any safety in that nowadays.
Yeah.
Craigslist, no less, right? Wow,
Yeah.
that's cool. So you just took that leap right then, and so it began. So what'd you do when you got there?
So when I first got there, I cried. Yeah.
Yeah. What
Yeah,
did I do? That's a fast
I had,
change. I mean, Hurricane is
yeah,
for anybody, no offense to anyone who's from Hurricane. I mean, it's a lovely place, but it is like a rural town. There's
yes,
cows. Like I grew up in Southern California and I'd never seen cows and horses in people's yard. I was like,
yeah,
what is this? I mean, it is small town for sure. It's growing,
yes,
but it's small town.
and when we went to high school, it was even smaller
Yeah, yeah,
compared to
for
now.
sure. Yeah, yeah.
So I get to New York and I literally was crying because I had never traveled before. I had
Mhm,
never been like that far away from anybody that I knew.
mhm.
And I bucked up and I started taking these cards out that I had, and I went to these agencies to see what I thought would fit me. And I found one that fit me. It was one of the biggest agencies in New York, and it still is. And they signed me right then and there, and I had a
Nice.
contract, and that was where my life started. Uh, where it
Yeah,
began.
lots of cool stuff and lots of hard stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
So,
so I'm trying to think if we want. I think you could just roll right into it. Roll right into
all
it. Give
right.
us the good and the bad and the ugly of modeling. I mean, whatever you want to give. But I know you. What? How many countries did you visit? A ton.
Oh yeah. So I'll start with the good stuff first.
Okay.
I started working right away. Was I worked my butt off, but I was accumulating relationships with
Mhm.
um, clients and designers, and this is what you do at first, so they can start trusting you. And I started working for some of the biggest names like Chanel. I worked as Marc Jacobs fit model, like personally with him. I did shows. I was doing magazines. I was doing it all, and I
Like modeling and internships, or like modeling?
oh, this was all modeling.
Okay. Yeah.
This was it.
Yeah. That was a big
And
time. So wow, you hopped right in.
yeah, so I started making lots of money.
Mhm.
That little apartment that I had in Brooklyn when I first started, I had moved on and moved to Manhattan on the Upper West Side. And
Okay.
so I would say that I was making more than a doctor makes. And that's
Mhm.
just to give you like an idea of
Mhm.
where I was at that time.
Mhm.
Um, and so I was dating a guy at this time, and you know, I was very young still, and he was like the love of my life, so I thought.
Mhm.
He was from another country. He was from Sweden,
Okay.
and I I'm very grateful for him because he was the first person that like encouraged me to travel out of the country.
Okay.
Um, So I had agreed to my agency that I would start working out of the country, and I started going everywhere, Europe, Asia, just
Mhm.
everything. And I ended up going to about 24 countries for work and for leisure. But like
Wow.
I had the life at that time. It was all like what I just put my mind to something and I did it. I had $500 in my pocket and I did it.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
just
you're
remember,
cooking dinner for your family at 13. So you were more
yeah,
than capable of just like that was like child's play. You're like, okay, cool. I can take care of just myself. Easy.
yeah,
Got
right,
this. Yeah.
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 So,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
it's
And
it's just like remembering this right now for later in the story. When I
okay.
put my mind to something, I do it and I get it.
Mm, okay.
Uh, but
Noted.
but moving on, where am I at?
Um, so you're the good with modeling. So
Yeah,
obviously you're gonna have some little seeds along the way of things that were probably not beautiful. So let's go there. Let's visit that for just a little bit.
sure. So, being so young and naive, I didn't really understand. Um, I didn't. I felt so good about myself. I thought I was beautiful. I thought that, you know, why would somebody deceive me in a way that the guy that I was with did?
Mm,
Um,
okay.
he he was on a school visa, so pretty much I was the breadwinner at the
Mm,
time, and
mhm,
I had left the country for a couple months for a job, and I had come home early, about a week early, to find him in a relationship with somebody else in my apartment. So
wow.
yeah, it was kind of being so young. It was kind of,
That was a big betrayal. That was
yeah,
somebody you had given. I mean, you went through all of this mistrust and a lot of in times where you didn't know what was going on and you thought that was the one thing you kind of had in your pocket. It seems like.
yeah,
And you have all
absolutely.
this going on externally, but you still haven't figured anything out internally at this phase of your life, I'm assuming.
No,
So, okay.
no,
So
because
go ahead, please.
because the modeling also is so like unreal, you know, like nothing. I don't feel like
Mhm.
anything's real.
Mhm.
I felt like everything was like, you know,
Mhm.
good all the
Mhm.
time, but I
Mhm.
guess I was blind. Anyway, so finding that out, put me in a really dark place, a deep depression. Being in New York and modeling, there's a lot of drugs and alcohol already.
Mm-hmm.
I knew it was there. I just I didn't accept it yet.
Mm-hmm.
But now was when I did. I
I
started
see.
to,
Because you were mourning this relationship, it seems like. Is that what I'm understanding?
I think so. And because I was
Okay.
mad,
Yeah.
I was angry.
Okay.
Um, and so my anger led to going out to these fashion parties and drinking alcohol. And later on, it led to the use of cocaine. And so I was partying a lot. I had lost myself so bad that I felt like the drugs weren't working anymore because I was doing it so much. Um,
Pretty common. It's very
and
common.
so, yeah. And so, I started missing my jobs. I would go out and party and
Mm,
supposed to be at a shoot or like
mm.
another job. And I was too busy partying, like I couldn't even leave my apartment because the sun was so bright.
Ah, well, and you haven't talked about anything at this phase of your life yet either, because we don't talk about things that are hard, right? So
Uh,
we're just gonna do whatever we can do to get through it. So
exactly.
it's very common. Yeah. Okay. So
Yes.
you started missing jobs, and there goes your spiral. The beginning.
Yes. And
Yes.
and so I going out, you meet people, and I met this guy, which was a bad idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's pretty common. Yeah.
yeah, so I met this guy and I started dating him, and he was a really bad man. He he was dealing drugs
Mm,
and just pretty deep into it. So at the time I had all the drugs that I could ever ask for, and
yeah.
money and just
Okay.
whatever.
Yeah.
And um
So it was a way to stay numb, and it was there all the time. So
yeah.
yeah. Okay.
So I got stuck in that hole pretty deep. Um I went to Paris for Fashion Week, and I was so sick and I couldn't even stay there. I had jobs that were already booked for me for Fashion Week, like shows.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I bought my own plane ticket back to New York so I could get high. This is how bad I was. And so the agency that I had in New York discovered that I had come home, and they gave me an ultimatum that I either go to rehab or they're going to drop me. And I agreed to I agreed to go to this rehab, and they had gotten a hold of my family, and so my parents knew what I was doing now. And
Mm-hmm.
so this was my first trip to a rehab.
Which is also very common for addicts. Usually
Yeah.
takes a couple. Yep. Uh-huh.
uh, and they had chose a 90-day program for me in California. And I had a really hard time with this program because I didn't know what recovery was. I didn't know, like, was I
You had
ready
never
to
had any
go?
taught, so
Yeah, because
you're never taught. Yeah.
I was new to the game. And so I get there and I did complete it, but I had my flight back home. We landed and we were on the runway, and I was already on the phone with my dealer. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
was not ready.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to feel the feelings that I had from my growing up. I didn't want to feel the feelings I had
Mm-hmm.
at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so moving on, there was some things got deeper and deeper with this guy that I was dating, and he actually started to mess around with heroin. and this was my first experience with heroin was with him.
And heroin's cheaper, correct? And it's a quicker high,
It's a different
right?
high. It's
Okay.
a downer. You know, the other stuff is an upper. So
Okay.
you put them together, and it's just
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, people can function from what I understand on the other stuff. I don't want to say it too many times. I don't know but for quite a long time. With From what I understand with heroin, it's not as easy to function for as long.
yeah.
Is that
It's
okay?
you can't be normal. Let's just say
Okay.
that.
Yep. Yeah.
Um.
These are the people on the
So
street that are rocking and mumbling
yes,
and
yeah.
yes.
So
Yep.
that was me.
Picking at their skin and all the
Yeah.
things. Yep. Uh-huh.
So picking, yeah. So I get wrapped up in the heroin thing, and the group of people that I was hanging out with in New York, they were all doing it. So, you
Mm-hmm.
know, I thought
Mm-hmm.
that, yeah, that was it. So I started not even caring about my jobs anymore at this point. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going back and forth to Utah, to my family, like getting clean and thinking that I'm okay, and then going back and just doing it again. And it was just this cycle that I was stuck in. Um, and one time that I went back to New York, because the guy I was dating, he was involved with dealing the drugs. We went to pick up some money, and he was acting really weird, and he told me to stay in the car, and I agreed to stay in the car. And I saw in the rearview mirror that he was getting something out of the trunk, and he went into the apartment, and I was waiting in the car for him, and I was thinking, this is taking a long time. So I get out of the car and I go into this apartment, and I know this guy that he's trying to get this money from. And I open the door, and he's got a gun to the guy's head. And um and at that point I knew, like, what am I doing? Like, this is my life
Mm-hmm.
now. This is insane. I go back to the car, and I don't know what he did. I know
Mm-hmm.
that he was very abusive to me as well, um,
Mm-hmm.
during this time, and he has pointed a gun at my head, and
Mm-hmm.
he's also pointed a gun and shot, like, not at me but right by me. So this is just like the depth that I at one point put my safety in myself,
Mm-hmm.
from not caring. But anyway, moving on, it's just getting really bad and really ugly. And I go back to Utah to get more help and to try to get away from this guy. Um, and I end up having another relationship because, mind you, when you're in this mindset, I don't know, you just don't care.
Well, and
So
you haven't been taught anything about healthy relationships at this phase of your life. So it's you don't know what you don't know. You're just
right,
in survival mode.
yeah.
So it's yeah. Okay, so keep going.
So I end up things were going really well at first, and I end up getting pregnant with my first son,
Mm-hmm.
and he was like the turning point for me at the time,
Mm-hmm.
to stay clean.
Yeah.
And I did, and I had my son, and everything was going really well. I just still felt lost, and I didn't know who I was.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that there was something going on again with this guy that the father of my kid was, like, what
Mm-hmm.
was happening.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he ended up, he broke my arm, and we were in
Mm-hmm.
California at the time. So that just started a whole new going to the doctor and getting pills. And so,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, that was that. And he ended up marrying his ex-girlfriend, and I knew that they were like, so I just felt defeated again.
Okay. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And you
yeah.
had this little one. So go on.
So, moving on after that, um, I started getting addicted to pills,
Okay.
and um, I ended up going. I ended up going to New York for a job because I was still periodically doing these jobs, like big paying money ones. I'd go back and I'd do it, and then I'd have money in my pocket.
Okay.
But I lost everything. I lost my apartment. I went back to mom's house, like the thing that I never thought that I was going to do. But yeah, she tried her hardest to get me off the drugs, and she was there for me. I never felt connected to my mom until then. She really put everything aside to help me, and I just didn't listen. I didn't accept it. I don't know. I wasn't ready.
Okay.
And I think when you're in it, like you don't really care about other people and their opinions. So you think what you're doing is right, and it's not.
Well, you're not actually yourself. It's almost like you're split in two, right?
Yeah,
There's the glimpse of Mandy, and then there's the drugs,
right.
and that's a different. Yeah. So, anyways, got it.
Okay,
And also it's your mom, and you've got there's mistrust there. So
there
even if
is.
her intent is good, you're still skeptical,
Yeah.
right? And
Oh yeah.
you're also a little bit, I would say frustrated. Resentment might be the word. There's
I
probably just
do.
a whole lot of all of that floating around, right?
Yeah,
So yeah.
there's just like everywhere I'm going, there's just uneasy feelings, and there's like
Mhm.
baggage, and I don't feel comfortable in my own skin.
Mhm.
So I think the drugs and alcohol played a big part in helping me at the time feel like,
Mhm.
you know, that's what made me feel normal, but I wasn't
Mhm.
normal at all.
Mhm.
So, I went to this job in New York, and, um, sorry, on my way to New York, I had met up with my dealer in Las Vegas. And I had a dealer in every stinking country and town that I ever went to.
That's the problem with being a standout person. It
Yeah,
doesn't take much.
you go up to
Plus, when
anybody
you
and you
know,
can ask. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay, and in the meantime, your little guy is where? With your mom?
So he's with my mom.
Okay,
Um,
so you meet up with your old dealer in Vegas, and you're getting ready to head to New York.
yeah, so I'm getting ready to go there, and I get high before we take off, and
Mhm.
I was angry, and just a dark person, and gotten in an altercation with somebody on the plane. And so they ended up handcuffing
Oh,
me on the flight, and we landed, and I'm sitting there with all these federal agencies or agents, wanting to take me to jail, and they did. And so this is where another huge turning point of my life starts. Um,
okay. So we
I
are we are 55 minutes in. How are we feeling? We want to keep going? I see that there's a couple of you on live. Um, I'm wondering if we should be continued, because I feel like
Yeah,
we could still go another hour.
yeah,
Um, so maybe pause there. This is interesting because when I spoke to you earlier, I you told me that it was because of an airplane, that the reason that the next step is coming, it was federal, not just a regular. And so my
right.
assumption was, I didn't ask, was that it had to do with maybe a drug movement, but that's actually not the case. you were saying that what happens when you get high is that you get super aggressive.
I do
Okay.
very much.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And so I feel like we would be doing an injustice to squeeze the rest of your story in a 20-minute spot.
I feel like too.
So you know what? I think if we just wanted to be continued, maybe we'll finish it either tomorrow or the next day or next Wednesday. Let's discuss that off air and see.
Okay.
But everybody knows where to find us. So in the meantime, before we pause, is there anything you feel like you want to add before we pause? And also, anybody who's watching, if you guys have a question or a statement to Mandy of gratitude or a question of curiosity, she claims to be a wide open book. We still have a couple more. We still have a couple more kids to cover before you even hit rock bottom. So twins, actually, right, Mandy?
Yes.
You had twins after this, right?
I did.
So and that story gets really hard too. It gets really sad.
Yes.
So okay, well, I don't see any questions out in the chat as far as right now, but let's come back to this.
Sounds good.
Thank you for your vulnerability. Sorry. These things are not easy.
No.
They're hard to share, I think. And I think you're incredible. And I am inspired by you so much. And I'm stoked to get to the rest of the story. And the thing about you, Mandy, is I think there's going to be more to the story 5 years from now too, right? That's the cool part. Is we'll have to revisit that. But I just want to kind of come full circle. So anyway, when I messaged Mandy a year ago, what I noticed is a healthy person. Her beauty was back. And if you guys saw the little clip of her story through the photos, you can kind of catch a glimpse of all the things. But I want to come back to this because this is super important where her arrest starts, because after that, we'll be able to get through a few more choices that still kind of led Mandy down a dark path, and then the path to recovery and healing. So my friend Valerie on here says hugs. So anyway, okay, well, we'll announce the to be continued. This was not purposeful, by the way, y'all. But I think it's a great place to stop. We'll come back to it. So, because I think all this is important. Also, the childhood stuff leads up into, I've talked about the book, The Body Keeps the Score. Have you read that, Mindy?
Have I read
the book,
Which
The
one?
Body Keeps the Score?
No.
There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score, and it talks about events in your childhood, even though you have a great childhood. Because I know you mentioned like there was bright moments in your childhood, but when you kind of pinpoint a few things that were really impactful, then you realize that you kind of answer to those things, like I can never communicate, or I'm scared, or I'll never be good enough, or whatever it is that a lot of people answer to, especially when they fall into addictions or things. So it's a really, really good book. But anyway, I feel like we could ramble all night, but let's come back and we will have a part 2 of Mandy Carter Lynn. Also, kind of a sneak peek too is she. I wanted to go into Luke, but we'll save that. Luke is her husband now, and he has a story too that we'll have to touch on at a to be continued. So okay, all right. Well, take care. I will see you hopefully tomorrow, if not in the next coming days. And is there anything else we need to do to wrap up, honey? We're good? Okay. All right, Mandy. We'll be back. Thanks
so much,
everybody
Renee.
for tuning in. I appreciate your guys' support.